Okay, so we'll get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Madam Onça. If you're new this week, I know we've had some other folks sign up. Welcome. I'm here in Awesome Town, which is my home in Richmond, Virginia, in our improvised recording studio, trying to make all these things happen. This is a standalone class about some of the major arcana cards in the tarot, traditional tarot, that are the easiest pills to swallow, we might say. Last week we did some of the more difficult, some of the cards that tend to be either the harbingers of challenging messages or tend to be challenging for you to read for other people, as a person in service to others. Some cards are easier to deliver the news of than others. So last week we did a bunch of that. If you're new in the class now and you want to get the link to last week's class, I'm happy to share it. You can watch it. It'll be just like this, very informal. If you have questions, by all means, throw them in the chat or jump up and down, scream, whatever you need to do to get my attention. This class is called A Walk in the Park, because the last week's class was called The Walk in the Dark. And I've taken the liberty of actually pinning some of my extra notes up here on my screen. So I feel like I am working on the deck of the Enterprise with all of these things going on. Again, my name is Madam Onça, and I am a longtime tarot reader and entertainer, teacher. I do all of that sort of thing. I always joke that at the end of the world, I would find myself working in the cantina with all my skills, and here we are in some version of the end of the world as we knew it. And sure enough, here I am, tarot reader, live streaming things. My time with the cards, I've spent maybe 20 or more years with tarot cards. That being said, I still only know a fraction of what there is to know. I tell you that not to intimidate you if you're just sort of getting your toe in, but just to say that this is one of those worlds where, there's international tarot conferences you can go to if you want to meet the people that write these books that I will refer to you to, assuming we all leave our homes again. You could go on tours and visit the places where the original decks are in museums in Italy and so forth. There's a whole world where you can use the tarot, if you want, as a lens to explore history and the human spiritual adventure. I do like to always refer people to books and authors that have been great influences on me, and I have two different books to share with you today for those of you that are note-taking type of folks. I always recommend Mary K. Greer and her wonderful blog, which is, again, it's probably 20 years of great stuff that she's got online, and Rachel Pollack, but I've got two new folks I want to mention today. This is a book, again, I've probably had this book since like 1996 or something, but this book is Jung and the Tarot. Of course, it's backwards in the Zoom, by Sally Nichols. If you are interested in Jungian psychology or the Jungian map of the consciousness, he's the one who really got us all using the words archetype, subconscious. He was a protege of Freud, and they had a big fascinating row because, as we know, Freud thought everything came down to sex, and Jung really believed everything for humans came down to the spiritual impulse and our desire to know ourselves better. So tarot and the archetypal journey. So this is a great book. It's super dense, but it's an opportunity to see how this writer talks about the fool's journey, which is that adventure, if you lay those major cards out from fool to world, and think of it as one person moving through a comic strip, a graphic novel of the human experience. This book talks about that. It's very dense, but even if you only, if you just kind of pick it up and dip in and out of it, it's still a great resource. This one I literally got in class or literally got in the mail, I should say, about 20 minutes before logging on today. This is an author who I can't believe I had never heard of, named Camellia Elias. She is a Zen philosopher who is a tarot person. I would show you this book, but I'm not sure you can really read her very well. Camellia Elias. She's written a zillion books. She's in a zillion podcasts. She has a very sort of infectious manic pixie dream girl quality about her speech, and she's got a great website I'm very interested in. I think she probably speaks French as her first language, maybe. So I just got this book in the mail. This is Divination with Cards, A Short History, one of many books she's written, and I'm super jazzed about it. Looking at her work, I really felt called to it. While she knows all the history type of information that I do try to impart to you. My impression is that she's somebody who's really opted to lean into the spongy, intuitive place with learning to read cards. And that is something that's hard to teach. That's the part where I'm just going to have to get you going and loft you. We'll have to let somebody else in. Okay, welcome, Linda. So those are the two books that I want to recommend that you put on your reading list if you like this sort of thing. Again, it's Jung and Tarot, An Archetypal Journey by Sally Nichols, Nichols, and A Divination with Cards, A Short History by Camellia Elias, which is Elias, or maybe it's Elias, I'm not sure. Amazon still delivers books during this time. So those are some resources you can lean into if you like that. Somebody was saying the book is renamed as Tarot and the Archetypal Journey. To answer the question, the two other authors that I often refer to, Mary K. Greer, Greer. She's one of the preeminent tarot scholars in the world. Very much, she's a great reader and a great thinker and an established writer, but most interesting to me, she is a scholar who, she travels the world going through archives and studying the history of the images, and like she's always up to something fascinating. So that's Mary K. Greer, and also Rachel Pollack, Pollack, who also has written a zillion books. If you Google them up, I'm sure they both have gigantic websites that are vast compendiums of information. Yeah, so those are two authors I always want to recommend. Okay, but today we're going to do our walk in the park. So if you've got cards, grab them, and if you want to make notes, you can do that. If you've got questions, pop them up. We're going to start with strength. In your deck, you may find some version of this. This is the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith version. Typically a lady in sort of Shakespearean dress with a lion. In fact, there's an image of a much older version of this card in this book. I don't know if you can see it right there. Here it is. This is a very, very old French version. Force. You can see it's a very stylized line. In my version, here's this. Whatever deck you're using, you may have some representation. It is typically a woman. It is typically a lion. In some of the old images, it's actually a picture of Hercules. And rather than, like this woman in the strength card appears to be going, "Come on, kitty, open up. Who's a good kitty?" Hercules is clearly tearing the lion's head off. So this distinction that we see in the evolving illustration says a lot about how the meaning of the card has shifted over time. As I mentioned last week, the meanings of the cards, fortunately, have evolved with the times, because of course we live in a very different world than people did 100 years ago or 500 years ago. The card has really come to mean the kind of strength that comes from co-arising, like becoming more powerful with, rather than having power over. So when this card comes up in a reading, it is typically encouraging you to find the kind of strength in a situation that comes from confidence, surety, more of a nurturing place of authenticity rather than a bullying place of domination. It doesn't mean that when in a reading it can't come up to say, you need to kick some ass. It may say that. But typically this card these days speaks, as I have come to say, to our higher angels. As far as how we do that. Again, it tends to be power together rather than power over. It is about courage, but it tends to be more of a tender courage, like a leading by example, and saying, "Look, everyone, I am here with you," doing the thing rather than forcing compliance from other people. We see that again as this woman appears to be like, "Who's a good kitty now?" And in my image, there's this great big lion. There's this woman very much sort of enveloped in the lion's comfort zone. And then in her lap, she has a little mouse. To me, that symbolism speaks to that notion of, what is it, an Aesop's fable? One of those stories from when we were kids where it's like, the lion is oh so mighty till he gets a terrible thorn in his paw. And, no amount of fighting and yowling and being the king of the jungle is going to fix it. It takes a little mouse being brave enough to climb in there and help deal with this mighty problem. So there's something there about finding creative, authentic ways to solve your problems without always having to rely on force. This also can be about the intellect, like you're taking the powers of the intellect and putting them in service of your intuition, rather than what we so often see playing out in the world, which is that your sort of intuitive, instinctual self is suppressed and replaced with what is supposed to be rational. But in fact, both programs are still running, so you're not as rational as you think you are. So in this case, you know, it's about letting your intellect serve what your gut thinks is true. The one other thing I want to add about this, I was just doing some reading today to sort of jog my memory about what other authors have said. And the Mother Peace Tarot, which I have mentioned in the past for y'all, I think Vicki Noble made that book, maybe. It's an old round feminist tarot deck. I usually bring it up in my history lectures. The Mother Peace Tarot, they describe this card. This is the wildness of the witch within, which I thought was a lovely expression. You know, it's sort of your animal nature, your feral self, brought into the modern era. So that's the strength card. When it comes up in a reading, again, it may be advocating for strong action, but it is most typically advocating for self-confidence, certainty, like being your own fortress and moving out from there rather than sort of swinging wildly. If you have any questions about that, let me know. The thing about the cards we're doing today is that while some of them do have like a shadowy aspect that we're going to touch on, these are the cards that tend to be, rather than the Hollywood gasp factor, they tend to be more like, ooh, I like that one. So there's our strength card, also known as force, or fuerza. Right, I am moving along. What's the next card we're going to work with today? Let's go to the Lovers. So nice to be able to see everybody's face. Okay, the Lovers card. Once again, the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, which is this deck that I keep holding up to you. This is the best known deck of this century and has had a lot of scholarship put into it. Again, there's volumes to be said about this, but this is basically the traditional image. Oh, look at that one. I know that one. The traditional image of the Lovers that is most often seen these days, or variations thereof. When you see things that look just like this, but slightly differently colored, or so, you know, maybe everybody is wearing slightly different clothes, those are called Rider-Waite clones. They're literally basically the same deck. Again, this is the standard one that shows up on shower curtains and cookies and soap and everything. This is our standard image. So this is that Lovers card. We can see here there's the great angel sort of arches over it. And this, interestingly, has got there's clearly like an Adam, Eve, tree of good and evil, tree of knowledge. There's a lot going on in the background there. And if that symbolism speaks to you, you can certainly lean into it. This is mine. Somebody else held up their version as well. In my case, I wanted to make it much more gender fluid to leave a lot more space for people to feel included as far as representation goes. Which brings me to a point I'd like to bring up. Many artists in the tarot in this period of time are finding ways to address either the gender spectrum, or at the very least, the orientation spectrum. My deck, I made them very gender ambiguous. They could both be he's or she's or any kind of intersex person. It's intended to be very ambiguous in a way that is very celebratory. The Cosmic Tribe Tarot, which is a really great, very artistic deck by Stevie Postman. That one, the way they went about it, it's a very gay positive deck. It came out of the Radical Fairy movement, which is a sort of a queers going back to the land kind of movement, Radical Fairies. Stevie made 3 Lovers cards. There's a he, she, there is a he, and there is a she. So at the beginning of the reading, if you were needing representation of love the way that you experience it in the romantic and sexual sense, as the reader, as the client or the querent, you could pick that lover's card and put it in the deck and say, well, this most represents the kind of experience that I hope to have, or that I genuinely have. Of course, before even, 20 years ago, it was always a very heteronormative. There was, a man and a woman. In some of the really old decks, apparently it was a man and two women, because it was biblical times. I don't know. That shifted to be a little bit more of a monogamish model. And now, again, we're blowing that open and making it inclusive, hopefully, of all kinds of relationship types.
Actually, Onça, I think I can speak to that.
Please.
Yeah, the Marseille deck has a man between two women, because the meaning, and this is when I learned this, it made everything clear. The meaning of the lover's card is actually choice.
Right. Absolutely.
And it, as opposed to the devil card, where it was lack of choice, subservience.
Right, because they were intended to.
There.
That totally makes sense. Because
yeah.
For those of you that saw the Rider-Waite-Smith version of the devil card last week, it's very similar in that in the middle of this, instead of the angel, there is sort of a big vulgar Baphomet in the middle, and the two figures are still standing there, but now they have like chains around their neck to the block that he is standing on. So it is very much like your choice has been eliminated, because the devil's card speaks to addiction, obsession, and compulsion. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you. Yay! Look at you.
I added something.
You did. I love it. Thank you. And this brings us very neatly to the next thing, which is that the lover's card is only sometimes about romantic love. I mean, there was another time period where this card is an image of the twins. It was Castor and Pollux, who, while as brothers, one was semi-divine and the other was entirely mundane, they were brothers, and they were crazy about each other. They couldn't imagine living without each other. They spent all their time together and so forth. But it was not a romantic love. It was a filial love. So with the twins card, being the lover's card, they were interchangeable. It was also about balance and bonding and choosing what you want and need, but it didn't have this specific sort of romantic and sexual component that we typically bring to it now. So thank you. That's very useful. What else can I tell you with the lover's card? It's certainly, there's choice, there's passion, there's desire. It can be about self-love sometimes when it comes up in a reading, whether it is about your relationship with a romantic partner or partners, or whether it is, again, how you relate to your family. My notion is this card is always saying you will do better caring for other people if you are also able to care for yourself. The tarot always bounces you back some homework. And, hence this, as April's saying, one of my favorite decks uses a mirror. There's that notion of, look, if you can love yourself, you can better be available for others. I'm trying to read the notes over here. There's a question about reversals. When it comes to reversals, which is reading the card as meaning the opposite thing when it shows up upside down, some readers do read those meanings. Some will just automatically turn it around and say, it just happened to get shuffled in the deck. There's no right or wrong way, and most people sort of go in and out in their career as lovers of the cards, depending on sort of what speaks to them at the time. It can represent, if it is, this card shows up inverted, it can represent an absence of choice or feeling sort of stuck, like you're not, you are not able to see all of the options that are available to you. It can be desire or choice thwarted is a way to look at it. Again, it can just be like, you need to spend some time taking care of you before you can, effectively care for or serve others. This card can come up around sexual liberty, gratification of desires. In my version of the card with the imagery, I really wanted to have, there's Kuan Yin and Pan are in the corners, and that is to represent that there's this passion that is represented by Pan, but there is the compassion represented by Kuan Yin, who is speaking to the sort of the homemaking as compared to the haymaking. You know, that sense of like building a life of comfort and interdependence with people that matter to you, and not just the drive-by good times. Nothing against those if that's your jam. And Barbara Moore, who's another author who I really enjoy, I was reading a little bit today. One of her notes on this is, if you are troubled by a tyranny of choice, you have too many options, she said, here's a prompt for you. Think about the person you'd like to be, like your best self, and then try to make the choice that that person would make. Like, try to lean in towards creating the conditions where you get to be and express your optimal self, rather than choosing out of fear, if that makes sense. So Barbara Moore, I like her. She's got some good words on that. What else can we say? Are there any other questions about the lovers? Again, it's been the twins. It's everything from physical love, lust, desire, just authentic connection. Again, we live in a time where blessedly our social mores are shifting. And so it doesn't have to be just two people, it can be representative of whatever is really happening for you in your life. All right, I've got a question over here. I'm going to take a second to peek at, make sure everybody's in the meeting. Okay, I've had a question about tarot for quite a while about reversals. The guardian angel. Yeah, okay. Is it considered that the card is laid in reverse from the reader's view or the querent's view? Okay, great. So what this person is asking, let's say I laid 3 cards down. I'm the reader, you are the querent. You're my friend, you're my client, you're my brother, whatever. And when I laid these cards down on the table, they ended up looking like this to you. You can see from my point of view, it's 2 reversals, but from your point of view, it's 1 reversal, right? Or vice versa. It depends what works for you, because my teaching style, or my tarot reading style rather, is very much about making it accessible. I have the reading pointed at them so they can receive as much information, and then I will do the work to sort of flip it in my head. If that's hard for you, not everybody's brain flips upside down and side to side. So if that's hard for you, you can sit side by side with somebody if you need to. At the moment, you can sit 6 feet away from them, or you can Skype it or Zoom it. But I try to make sure that the reading is oriented towards them. And as far as the guardian angel, honestly, I forget which angel this is supposed to be in this deck. There's a lot of fantastic detail about the specifics of this deck are available in this book, Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot, which is a giant book that came out in the last few years. This is literally a breakdown of every symbol in every one of these cards and why she drew Lily of the Valley instead of daffodils on any given card. They've done exhaustive research to get to that point. So you can get as deep in the weeds on that as you want. But I would say that in general terms, for folks who are not of the Catholic symbolism persuasion, what you can say here is that there's this notion of choice. There's this notion of finding like the livable balance. This mountain in the back is supposed to represent reaching the heights of spiritual unity, and that archangel figure is there to say, you've got the right idea. Do the good thing, as you saw in the other card where it's the devil, and the devil's is like, this is going to be so much fun for me. Because because their version of the devil is there to make sure that their good time is your bad time. Okay, so oops, now I had so much fun I jumbled up all my cards. Strength, lovers. Let's do the sun. The sun. Now in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, we see the sun. Typically, it's some version of a big banner, a little pony, a naked baby, the sun, and things that symbolize the sun. The first edition of my deck, I made a radical departure from this design, and I have to say it is it is the worst piece of art that I ever put in the public eye, but it wasn't for lack of trying. My sun card was atrocious. So when I remade the deck, I redid that. When I reissued the deck, well, thank you. Well, I had to redo that one. In fact, when I told Barbara Moore, who had been my old editor, the one who I just quoted a minute ago, that I was reissuing the deck, she said, I'd be happy to promote it to other people as long as you tell me you were going to redo that card. And the issue there was that I had never really drawn a child. I didn't have kids yet, and I had no idea how to manage the gigantically different proportions of children, and it came out looking a little creepy. So the good news is that this time it came out like this, which I'm quite happy with. And you can see, I mean, this is, again, very much this card, you know, just revisioned to have a sort of different quality of inclusivity. There's no reason it has to be a little Aryan kid. And of course, now I've spent, you know, many years surrounded by children, so I know how to draw them. Well, thank you. Somebody said it was good. It was a cute baby. There's a quote on the internet about that baby that said, this card would be lovely, but it has the face of a lying politician, is what somebody said about it. So this is the new one. The Sun is a great card. It's rather simple. When it comes up, it is a card of celebration. It is a card of benediction. It says, you done good. That'll do, pig. The work that you have put in was time well spent. Because everything about this card speaks to light and radiance, and you know, the baby is even, you know, naked, so there's this quality of sort of having set down your armor and just being seen as you really are. There's a notion here that you have it is appropriate for you to take a minute and rest on your laurels. You've done great things. You work so hard, and it's time to take a minute and enjoy it. When this card comes up, it speaks to a time period of feeling good, a time period of looking good, a time period of feeling comfortable being seen for the unique creature you are. You know, some of the versions of this say, you know, everything is great, have a party. I know that some of us who have been in seclusion have actually been thriving in quarantine. Maybe you don't want to celebrate feeling good by inviting a whole bunch of people up close to you. You know, we can walk away from the extrovert bias that our culture has, and you can celebrate looking and feeling fabulous, however is best for you. This card definitely speaks to feeling comfortable taking up space. It is about falling in love with yourself and your own potential. When this card does show up occasionally inverted, that can definitely be self-doubt. Like, you know, it can't be as good as it seems. Like, I can't trust it. Or people tell me that I'm doing a good job, but I can't believe that because of my own life experience. Surely this is going to bite me in the ass. So that self-doubt is part of the shadow of this card. And I realized recently, again, when the Sun comes up on a reading, it is very nearly, like 97% of the time, going to be a card of benediction. Everything is great. You know, everything is great. You are blessed. You have earned it. Enjoy the moment. Have a party. Don't have a party. At its worst, because this card says, lean into your own experience, fall in love with yourself, enjoy everything that you're doing, share it with the world. At its worst, this is a card of entitlement. This is the card that says, well, why doesn't everybody see that everything is wonderful? I'm on the top of my game. I have absolutely no empathy for other people's vulnerabilities. I have no empathy for other people's experiences. I have no empathy for the immunocompromised. This is a card that there's just a tiny percent of the time you are sun blind. You're having such a great time that you literally can't see that the darkest shadow is right behind you. Yeah, narcissism. We'll call it that. Yeah, it's like, it's sun blindness. It's like everything is so great you just can't see. And, you know, every once in a while you're going to think you're running across an evenly lit plane and you're going to step in a pothole because you didn't see the shadow, because you were blinded by how glorious your experience is. Again, I want to hasten to add that this, I don't want you to look at the Sun and go, ooh, this is the card of the secret narcissist. Just know to look out for that. And if you have the Sun card, but it's surrounded by stressful cards, you know, it's surrounded by stressors. There's lots of, you know, lots of swords, tens of bad things. You may go, how could these all things all be the sun? Oh, there's some unresolved unresolved privilege here. What else can I tell you about the sun? Yeah, it's pretty much a great, overall, it's a great joyful card. And when it comes up, you go, um, all right, let's jump to, how are we doing on time? Oh, we're doing good. Okay, let's do the star. Traditional tarot deck has 78 cards. These days, you know, throughout history, that has been bigger and smaller. But a traditional deck these days has 78 cards, and there are all these major cards go from 0 to 21, I want to say. So there's a whole bunch of majors. There's a bunch near the end where we see, you know, the sun, the star, the world, the moon. It's like a very celestial sort of congregation of cards near the end of the majors. I left the moon out of today's reading, even though it is neatly sort of sandwiched here with the sun and the star and everything. Personally, I love the moon card, and it speaks to me. But for some people, it is like if you're a witchy kind of person, you probably go, "Oh, I love the moon." But it does speak to a lot of subconscious material. There's a lot of the moon suggests there's a lot of work to do. So when it comes up in a reading, you may feel like the goddess is paying attention to me. That's nice. But your average client may just be like, this is a dark vista full of wild animals. It may not be as warm and comfy for somebody else who doesn't share, you know, your perspective. So, you know, that's just something to be aware of. So we'll talk about the moon on another day. Today, we're going to go for the star. Here's the star. Yes, dreams and nightmares and uneven terrain. So here it is. We see a blonde lady who forgot her pants. She's having a good time playing bartender by the side of the water here. Interestingly, she has inverted nipples, which I think is an interesting choice. Makes her almost look like a statue. We see all the stars around her. This card has traditional associations with everything watery, everything Aquarius, the Pleiades. One of the books that I was reading through to prompt my memory said, why don't you take an Epsom salt bath? Go swim in your pool. Like this card says that, you know, one of the ways you can heal and celebrate is to enjoy the water. Here's my version. Again, very, very much the same, just I wanted it to look a little bit more like a nightscape and a little bit more like a brown person. So, but still, it's pretty much being with nature. When this card comes up, again, it's definitely a card of benediction. This card is about healing. This card is about cleansing. It is about finding comfort. A lot of times this card is speaking to us after we have gone through some kind of period of difficulty. So it's, you know, again, there's that like, go take a bath, take a sauna, whatever is healing for you. It is the calm upon the waves after the storm. Like the energy was all spent, it was all worked out, and now you're just sort of going to flow, sort of move gently with the current. You are no longer fighting what's happening. It is time for you to start to move through it. With that in mind, this card basically says, you did good, hurrah! But if you want to think about it in terms of action, like how it might relate to somebody's situation, this card can be about like absolution or forgiveness. It may be that, you know, you feel better because you were able to let go of a grudge or your anger, or, you know, recognize that, you know, you can't change someone, and trying to make them change is hurting you and not changing them. So it may have to do with sort of coming to a still place in yourself as you find some way to forgive or move on. So it's recovering from dark times through either giving or getting some kind of absolution. And again, there's this notion of comfort. Like maybe you need to do things that are comforting to you. Maybe you want to comfort others. It also has there's the healing component. This card also has a very much of a mystical component. It is about vision. It is about clarity and sort of purity of purpose, like saying, now that I've been through all that, I know what I do want to do. I know what I don't want to do. It is about having sort of come up out of that water, like you were getting drubbed, now you're up out of it, and your horizon is broadening. You can see the big picture. So it's transformative. It suggests that you have already been transformed by what you have been through, and it is time to reap the benefits of that in terms of all the channels are cleared out. At its most shadowy, this card has, it is the reverse of that. It's blockage, it's sort of stagnant water, it's a lack of energy. It is feeling like instead of swimming, through clear, joyful water, like you may be making progress, but like you're moving through ectoplasm, you're swimming through mud. So this card, at its worst, can feel like swimming through jelly. In general, when it comes up, you're going to go, oh, thank goodness. This person got all these other cards speaking to their challenge. I'm so grateful. Here's the star. This is going to help us speak to them moving through it and re-emerging in a way, feeling almost cleansed and wiser for it. So there's the star. Again, if you have questions about that, feel free to pop them in here. I do love the questions. It's nice to get, I'm getting some great questions today. And from the star, we're going to go to the world on our journey through celestial bodies. Here's the traditional world. Again, as I mentioned last week, Pamela Coleman Smith, who made this deck, shortly after she made this deck, although she had done a lot of very sort of metaphysical and theatrical work, shortly after this, she converted to Catholicism because she really liked it. It spoke to her. So you can see there's the beginnings of, for somebody who spent a lot of time running around with like Aleister Crowley and their friends and a lot of Shakespearean actors and everything, she finds herself moving more and more into what we might call like traditional Christian imagery. So we see here this figure, the world. They're moving around inside this sort of big laurel wreath. We've got these symbols of the elements and saints in the corner. Here's my world. Same, just a little different. Clearly, the world in some decks and in some versions of my deck, it's also called the universe because it is the notion of the big thing, the big thing in which we're all immersed. Aleister Crowley, in his deck, he refers to it as the eon. It's much more for him about like we are the world. We are moving through this time period and we're going to switch over to a whole other experience. We'll explain more about that. So she has a lot of names. The world. When this card comes up, she, be it world, universe, eon, oh, does it? I'll have to look it up. Somebody said that the steampunk world card looks like me. This card generally speaks to completion, like something has run its cycle. You've gone from the Fool, which is that 0, is that very first card. You've gone through all of the sort of learning on that Fool's journey that Jung explored and that Joseph Campbell explored. You go through that whole business. We come to the world. That's the part where like, look at you, you did it all. You did all the things. So when this card comes up in a reading, it is it's completion, it is success, it is accomplishment. It is, again, please note that this is you right before you step into the next phase of being the Fool, meaning I started here, I was the Fool. I learned all this stuff, I got a little wiser, life experience, cope with people, trauma, death, addiction, nature, beauty, wonder, come around, and here you are, you've reached the top of this sort of spiral. Once you've figured everything out, completed, accomplished, success, you're going to step off. And then again, this is the part where you start all over. Maybe you know everything there is to know about tarot, and now you decided you're going to learn everything there is to know about gardening. And you'll go through a whole period where you're the person who doesn't know any about that, and eventually you accumulate more and more knowledge. So this card is about taking your place in the cycle from a student to teacher to master to transcending that and becoming a student of something else. If you have any challenging feelings when this card comes up in a reading, usually they have to do with, am I ready to end this phase? Like, I just got comfortable where I am. Am I ready to end that and start something else? When it comes up in a reading, it's generally sort of putting a bow around your previous experience and saying it's time to acknowledge and move on. You may have feelings about being at the end of a cycle. I wanted to say also, as far as that like world, eon, universe, part of what I think happened there is that it used to be, you know, the world was the biggest thing people could think of, right? When we had a different sense of the cosmos. And then we got this idea that there was a solar system or a universe. Crowley put a spin on it and said, you know, it's more about the cycles of time that we're all moving through. This comes to an end. You know, we move out of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius or whatever. So your eon, you know, is this big chunk of shared experience. I'm sure that there are decks that are, you know, it's not the universe. We now know that there's lots of hypothetical universes. So I'm sure that there's somebody has made a deck with parallel universes, or, you know, the interdimensional realms around us. It really, this card is a way that we can sort of map our collective understanding of how the geography of the world works. Yeah, there's definitely a Mother Nature sort of creation aspect in this card. Like, she is very much, that's part of why I wanted it to be a curvy person. Like, the universe should be a plus size wonder. The universe is everything. So she's typically, the Empress comes up as the real like Gaia, like your mother, the earth, the one you live on. She's almost like, this is almost like your mother's mother. It's like even bigger. So more of the creation and less of the earth goddess. Is there anything else I want to say about that? Yeah, if it comes up with any, you know, if either as a reversal or if you get this card, which normally would be, you know, the smiley emoji, this would normally be the exclamation point. That's like, look at you. If it comes up and it's surrounded by other cards that are sort of sticky, that feel like it, like this card, the energy of this card's being held back, then this card, that would be about the unlearned lesson, the uncompleted project, the unharvested garden. Like, you've done a bunch of the work, and for some reason, whether it is personal shortcomings or, you know, limitations of circumstance, you are unable to complete it according to the normal means. An example that comes to my mind right now is all the kids who would be in their, you know, senior year of high school. This is the part where they would be, you know, going to the dance and doing their SOLs and whatever those end of year rituals are that kids are brought up to expect in a sort of mainstream society, and through no fault of their own, they're not doing those things. So they are still coming to the end of the you know, primary school cycle, right? They're still coming to the end. They're still technically, they got to the end of the experience, but it is sort of a bendy version. They're not getting the standard issue version because they're basically getting a grade and being sent out into the world. So there's a quality of inversion and incompletion to their completion. And there's no point in them going back and doing another year of school so they can do those activities. They just have to say, oh, in this time and place, this is what done looks like now. Okay, so we're going to come to our last card. Oh my goodness, and I'm going to talk fast, which is the Temperance card. And then, again, I'm open to some additional questions. Or if you have any, once we're done with the Temperance card, if there's any other cards in the majors that you're like, I would have thought that this would be one of the happy cards. There were a number of runners up for it, but of course we needed to do what we could fit in this amount of time. So the Temperance card, speaking of angels, this card is also known in some decks because of Crowley's influence as art. It is very much the alchemist. It is the barista. It is the person, the mixologist making the perfect spiritual cocktail there. We see the irises. We see the light on the mountain. We see the rainbow. This is my version. Boop. Again, fundamentally the same card, just brought differently. I want to say, if you're a meditating or if you want to do any kind of extended technique with the tarot, meaning beyond just reading books, if you want to, do some guided meditations and so forth, this is an amazing card to do that with. What that looks like in practice, if you have someone that you want to work with, you can do that. You can pre-record yourself. I'm sure that the internet is probably covered in pre-recordings. My tarot teacher, Kate Nordstrom, used to do this for me. And it's basically like you rest, relax, lay down, sit in a chair with your eyes closed, whatever. And you have the description for you of that you are passing through the door frame of the card. You come into the landscape of the card and you interact with whatever is there, whether it's the temperance angel or the water pour of the star or the very put upon person in the snow and the Five of Pentacles. Like, you can do a guided visualization going into the card that will give you, it may not give you more words, but it will give you more sort of lived experience in order to help you describe these cards. I say that because the temperance card is awesome for that. I went into this card and my experience with this entity was that it was enormous, just a gigantic entity that was like luminous, but very placid, like almost like a statue. It was alive, but it was in no hurry. And I was simultaneously there in this visualization, trying to learn more about the meaning of the card. And I was also just taking in a tremendous amount of visual information about them, which is what led to my card being almost peacocky. So this card, when we think temperance, of course, you think of the temperance movement, perhaps, which is a movement towards moderation. This is not a card that tells you to not do anything, but it tells you to do whatever you're going to do in a livable balance. So it is moderation. It is self-control and self-awareness. It can be ongoing adjustment to changing conditions, because what worked well for the temperance angel 1,000 years ago may not work well now, right? It's about you having the sort of good temper to be flexible in a changing environment. So flexible thinking, as my partner always says, semper gumby, which is to be always flexible. It's also about patience, which some of us are very poor at. There's that symbolism of pouring, hand to hand, which is that alchemy. It's the synthesis. It's not just putting, the lemon juice and the sugar water together to make lemonade. It is adding something in the process that makes art, that makes something that is greater than the sum of its parts. That is the magical synthesis that makes this card a patron of the arts, whatever that is for you. Personal alchemy. It is also very much about compromise. By that, to me, I always describe this as this card asks you to find the livable compromise that does not leave you compromised. If you are not sharing, you're not seeing things the same way as another person, how much can you walk back towards them and still be in your authenticity before you have given away too much and now your own integrity of needs, boundaries, aesthetics, whatever the question is, are compromised. So it is compromise in the best sense of, I am willing to give you this in order to keep things moving, and this is the trade. So it is harmony in a sense. Until I started doing music, I never really knew what harmony meant. Like I got that it was a word that was analogous to like getting along or making things work. But an actual harmony, of course, if you're a music person, it is how different frequencies blend together to build, to co-build a sound or vibration. So it's not just a bunch of people all doing the same thing. It is people in a situation working together to, once again, build that thing that is the perfect cocktail, the perfect community event, the perfect garden, the most livable roommate dynamic. Whatever the blend is that you're going for, this is about trying to find and build that harmony that everyone can resonate with. There's a subtle awareness. The biggest thing about this card, when it comes up in a reading, again, it's one of those ones that's like, oh, great, good for you. You got temperance, The card believes in you, and so do I. When any of these cards come up, if you look at it and you think in the context of a reading that it is giving you its best self, it probably is. If you look at any of these 6 cards in a reading and you feel like there's a lot of static, a lot of the other cards around are speaking to stressors, then you need to reinterpret what these big benevolent major arcana are trying to tell you in the context of those sort of more day-to-day cards of struggle. Does that make sense? Let me know if you have any particular questions or comments. We've got about 5 minutes, and I can either jump into whatever other cards you might think of as some of the good guys in the majors, or even the minors. Just let me know. I've been talking for an hour, so take a second to sip. All right, how about the Empress? Absolutely. So the Empress and the High Priestess are totally on my short list. I love them. So the Empress card, for anybody who doesn't happen to have one, let me see if I've got her here. The Empress she is essentially the Earth Mother. She is and it doesn't have to be like literal motherhood for people who aren't into that. It's about abundance, fullness, living your life to the best. She is the one who got the guacamole and the tiramisu because there was no reason to not live your most delicious life. Let me see if I can find her. There is a rule about the cards, which is whatever card you're looking for is always the 78th in the pile from where you started, meaning she's going to be far away. So here's a version of the Empress. She's usually on some kind of a throne. There's some kind of a crown. There's a broad sense of nature. And the High Priestess, in contrast, we see it's much more of an austere environment typically. There's some pomegranates, maybe there's some moonlight, but the Empress is definitely deep in it, again, saying, have a spa day. Get somebody to rub your feet. The Empress card is great. But if you're a person who has issues with your mother, for example, if you are a person who is uncomfortable with the sort of with Hestia, with this whole notion of the domestic. She can speak to the sexy, she can speak to the mom, she can speak to the domestic life. And if you're a person who's got issues around any one of those parts, she may not be as comfortable for somebody as she might be for you, if that makes sense. Mostly the Empress comes up as a good guy. Every once in a while she'll show up as like, that your domineering mother, or whatever. In which case, again, you have to interpret according to someone's, to the nature of their question, to the experience, and to the cards that come up around it. We probably have time for one more. Any other questions? This has been really great. I really appreciate everybody's asking great questions today and being available for it. Thank you. If what's going to happen here, when we're done, I will, this is all being recorded, and this week, hopefully I got it so it's not everybody's heads the whole time. I will gladly share the link with everyone after the fact so that you can review, you can, take your notes, you can listen to it later. By all means, I want you to be able to enjoy it at whatever is your best time. And if you have follow-up questions, where you're like, I don't understand what you meant by that. Of course, I'm totally available for you. I'm happy to follow up. I'll get you the link, and we will do this again next week with a whole other subject. So yeah, thank you. I'm going to give you a round of applause. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you, all 18 of y'all. Oh, and I will gladly get you next week's recording. Just email me, and I'll make sure to send you the link. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to see if I can now figure out how to end the meeting. High-tech maven that I am. Bye. Blessed be.